Have you ever looked at Japan and just wondered, how do they do it? It's one of the most expensive countries on earth, yet people there have some of the highest savings rates in the world. It just doesn't seem to add up. But the secret? Well, it's not what you'd think. Let's dive into the incredible philosophy behind the Japanese art of saving.
So, what's the deal? How have they mastered this? The answer isn't about getting bigger paychecks or landing a high-powered job. Nope. It's about a completely different way of thinking about money. A philosophy that prizes discipline and making smart choices way more than just earning a high salary.
So in this explainer, we're going to break that philosophy down. We'll start with the cultural mindset that's the foundation for everything. Then we'll look at the practical tools they use, like Kakeibo. We're also going to explore how they structure family finances, see how daily habits make a huge difference, and finally, uncover the ultimate goal, this idea they call quiet wealth. Okay, first up, let's talk about the cultural foundation. See, before we get into the how-to, you've really got to understand the philosophical why behind their financial habits. This isn't just about reading some good advice in a book. It's woven into the very fabric of the culture. It all starts with this idea of Kaizen, which is all about making small, continuous improvements every single day. So instead of some drastic, painful budget cut that you can't stick to, the focus is on tiny daily habits. Things like turning off lights when you leave a room, packing your lunch instead of buying it, or using cash so you actually feel your money being spent. Each one might only save you a tiny bit, but over a year, those small choices add up to some seriously big savings. And then there's this incredibly powerful concept called Mottainai. It roughly translates to don't waste, but it's so much deeper than that. It's a core cultural belief that wasting anything, food, time, money, you name it, is just fundamentally wrong. This mindset naturally leads you to reuse and recycle, and it makes you pause and think before you buy anything new. And all of this is built for the long game. In Japan, becoming financially independent is a core value, something that's taught from a very young age. The whole goal is to be self-reliant, right? To avoid ever becoming a financial burden on your family down the road. Saving for the future isn't just a smart idea, it's seen as a basic personal responsibility. Okay, so we've got the mindset down. But how does this philosophy actually work in practice? Well, it starts with a real, tangible system, and the most famous one is a method that's over a century old called Kakeibo. Kakeibo literally means household financial ledger. It was created way back over 100 years ago, and get this, unlike all our modern budgeting apps, it's a completely manual pen and paper system. This simple physical act of writing down every single thing you buy makes you so much more aware of your spending in a way that just tapping a credit card never will. And the process is just beautifully simple. 4 steps. First, you write down your total income for the month. Second, you subtract all your fixed expenses, rent, bills, the usual stuff. Third, and this is key, you set a savings goal for the month. And finally, you track every single yen you spend, putting it into a category as you go. And here are those all-important categories. All your spending gets sorted into 4 main buckets. Needs, which is for survival stuff. Wants, for all the fun extras like going out to eat or shopping. Culture, which is for personal growth, things like books or hobbies. And unexpected, for, well, emergencies. At the end of the month, you look at these categories and see exactly where your money went. It makes it so easy to spot where you can trim the fat. But the real question is, does this old-school method actually work? Oh yeah, it's not uncommon for Japanese families using this simple, mindful approach to consistently save up to 30% of their income. That is an incredible result for a system that just uses a pen and a notebook. Now let's zoom in a bit and see how this all works within the family. Because Japan has a really unique way of handling household finances, and it often revolves around the housewife, or ShuFu. This slide really shows you the difference. In a lot of Western cultures, right, finances are either a shared responsibility or everyone just kind of manages their own money. But in the traditional Japanese ShuFu model, the husband will often hand his entire paycheck over to his wife. She then becomes the household's CFO, the chief financial officer. She manages the budget, pays the bills, handles the savings, and even gives her husband a personal allowance to spend. So how do they manage all this? Well, many use a brilliant cash-based envelope system called shokuryo. At the start of the month, they physically put cash into different envelopes labeled for food, utilities, savings, and so on. By using actual cash, they can literally see how much is left in each category, which makes it pretty much impossible to overspend. Okay, so with all this saving and budgeting, does that just mean a life of constant sacrifice? Not at all. Let's look at how these ideas actually show up in daily life and how being frugal can, believe it or not, feel like a form of luxury. They pull this off with some really clever cultural mindsets. For instance, the idea of Ichigo Ichi-e values unique, once-in-a-lifetime moments. So people prioritize spending money on meaningful experiences rather than just buying more stuff. And buying secondhand isn't seen as being cheap, it's seen as being smart and resourceful. Even the whole KonMari spark joy thing applies to your finances. If you own less, you avoid those impulse buys and save money, all while living in a cleaner, more organized space. And all of this is supported by what's called ShuFu no Chie, or housewife wisdom, basically a whole collection of practical life hacks. We're talking about things like batch cooking meals for the whole week, knowing the exact time of day supermarkets mark down fresh food, and simple energy-saving habits that all add up. They cut costs without making you feel like you're missing out on a thing. All right, so this brings us to the final and maybe the most important piece of the puzzle. What is the end goal of all this discipline? Why do it? Well, the answer lies in a totally different understanding of what wealth even means. This quote, it just captures the entire Japanese approach perfectly. In so many cultures, wealth is something you show off, with flashy cars and designer brands. But in Japan, real, true financial success is often completely invisible. This is all rooted in a concept they call hikikomigane, which is this belief in keeping your wealth private. The number one priority isn't status or showing everyone how well you're doing. It's about achieving financial security and, just as important, peace of mind. You'll see millionaires there who live incredibly simple, unassuming lives. And this way of thinking totally shapes their investment strategies, too. The focus is on long-term stability, not high-risk, get-rich-quick schemes. So you see a strong preference for safer things like government bonds, solid savings accounts, and real estate that provides a steady income. It's also why the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, is really starting to catch on with younger people there. It fits perfectly with this goal of freedom over flash. So in the end, the Japanese art of saving is about so much more than just numbers in a bank account. It's a whole philosophy of life that values security, mindfulness, and freedom way more than materialism. And that leaves us with a really good question to ask ourselves. What does true financial freedom really look like to you?